as well as the wealth of construction projects that are going to be required for us to operate these new trains on our service. We have some of these construction projects on our audit plan this year, and we expect to have them in future audit plan years. So today we're going to talk about the Buy America pre-award, which we just completed not too long ago in sunny Sacramento, California. So the internal audit team, pre-award team, traveled to Sacramento, California to visit the Siemens Mobility Assembly Plant. The team included 2 members of internal audit, myself as well as Molly O'Donnell, our staff auditor too, the railcar project manager, Brian Moore, as well as the railcar equipment manager, Casey Blaze. We also had additional support back at the HQ from the contract administrator, Mabry Harris, as well as members of the fleet management team, which include Dan Dietrich, Don Herodom, and Dan Kurg, who helped us review the proposed bill of materials against the specifications. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Molly O'Donnell, who's going to tell you a little more detail about what we did in our Buy America review, what we observed, and what our results were. Molly?
Good morning, Mayor Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, and General Manager Birdsong. So our objectives for the Buy America pre-award certification were to confirm that railcar components and subcomponents that were manufactured domestically make up 70% or greater of the total value of the railcar, and to confirm that final assembly activities will take place in the United States, which we viewed at Siemens plant in Sacramento. The objectives for the purchasers review portion of Buy America, which fleet management was very helpful with, was to confirm that the list of components proposed by the vendors matches our solicitation specifications, and to confirm that the vendor is responsible and capable of delivering the railcar. Finally, while we were in Sacramento, we had the opportunity to do some technical tours. So Stephen and I participated in some of them, but more importantly, Casey Blaze and Brian Moore were able to meet with Siemens staff and talk about manufacturing design of the railcar, integration of software systems on the railcar, and how they will deliver the railcar to GCRTA. So we've included some pictures from our trip. We didn't have the opportunity to take a group picture of the Buy America team at the plant, but we did take a selfie in the airport. So we just wanted all of us were behind the camera in the plant, and we just wanted to include this to highlight Casey and Brian's contributions. They were really invaluable coming with us on the Buy America trip. On the left is the truck for a rail car. I believe it's the truck for an S200. Siemens, a separate division of Siemens, manufactures the truck also at Sacramento, and so we got to tour the truck manufacturing, what they call bogie manufacturing operation there, in addition to the final assembly operations. On the right is a car shell. There was a wide range of rolling stock in various stages of assembly. This picture is interesting because on the left, it's a San Francisco Muni car, and on the right, it's an Amtrak locomotive, and Siemens shared with us that this is the lightest and the heaviest rolling stock that they've manufactured.
And the one on the left, I believe, is more similar to what we
yes, it's a
RTA
S200.
Receiving.
Okay. This is a picture from where they put together the electrical harnesses that go into the rail car. And then this is a picture of if the rail cars are delivered by rail, what will be used to deliver them, I believe. So our results, we reviewed the Siemens cost information, their proposed bill of materials, and certificates from their suppliers. And internal audit found Siemens to be in compliance with the pre-award Buy America regulations and we will issue the pre-award certificates of compliance. I'm going to turn it over to Tony to talk about changes.
I was thinking about this and how hard this must be to audit, because how do you know where every nut and bolt and everything is from? And I was also thinking, what are the consequences? So let's say you find after the pre-award and we're in this process, and let's say there's some sort of supply chain, as we keep seeing these things, and Siemens substitute something else. What are the consequences for them not complying with the contract? And what is the consequences to us if that happened?
Well, first, I think a major goal of the pre-award is to ensure that they have a sufficient supply chain of domestic manufacturers, such that if something goes awry with one manufacturer, they could replace it. So for many of the components and subcomponents we reviewed, we looked at multiple domestic manufacturers, where if one comes in higher than they thought, they could replace it, or one can't deliver on time, they could replace it. As far as the consequences, maybe I'll let Tony discuss that portion.
Thank you.
Sure, and as Molly said, we went over and above. The minimum requirement is 70%, but the Siemens goal is actually over 80%. So trying to keep that supply chain, coming. But in terms of issues, should there be, where they drop down below the 70 percentile, then there are some federal regulations that come into play. And, we have to follow those strict guidelines, that will put our federal funding in jeopardy if we don't comply with the federal funding requirements. But we are very satisfied, and we feel that Siemens can definitely make this car with the domestic supply chain that they have in place.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Any other questions on the Buy America?
Okay. Tony, one question. I'm just structurally, are we auditing Siemens because we're auditing it because we're the purchaser, or are we auditing and then therefore we're subject to a federal audit, or are we essentially delegated the federal audit and we're doing it on behalf of the federal government? Is that?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Mayor Weiss. That's a good question. As the grantee, it is our requirement to ensure that the manufacturer is capable and complies with the federal requirements. So the second part of that, though, is that, and we are actually undergoing a triennial review right now by the Federal Transit Administration, where part of their review is to ensure that we've done that. And as you're aware, we've purchased a number of buses. We're in the process of purchasing this rail car. We've had some other vehicles and equipment like the locomotive or a rail car mover, all subject to Buy America requirements. So all on our radar, and working closely with the procurement department, with the legal department, and as Molly said and Stephen said, with our fleet management group. So it's a team effort to ensure that the grantee, us, is following those requirements.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions on the Buy America? Okay. The next spot in our agenda is the Institute of Internal Auditors is once again overhauling or updating their professional standards for us. The last time this was done was in 2017. And, in summary, they're going from some shoulds and mays to some musts, and then providing us with some real definite language in order for us to clarify some of the standards in place. Getting a new name, the Global Internal Auditing Standards, makes it a little bit easier for us to share that title with folks. But in summary, though, there is a new structure that's coming. They're going to be aligning the standards with the principles, and then adding considerations for implementation and evidence of conformance with each of the standards. I would say most notably that there is going to be some new language that's going to provide some clarification to, in this case, the Board of Trustees, or in other audit shops, the governing body. And it's our responsibility to share those standards with you as, you know, as they're proposed and as they're confirmed and put out there. Other points of clarifications are for my position, the Chief Audit Executive. So in terms of how we'll manage the shop and how we'll manage our audits. And then obviously, there'll be some changes in terms of quality assurance and how we do each of our projects and how we rate the overall quality assurance of our program. The Institute of Internal Auditors has an open comment period at this point. We're working with our professional group at APTA, the American Public Transportation Association. They have a committee of audit professionals. My peers and other shops are all part of that membership group. And we've had several meetings where we've been discussing the standards. And we'll be sharing our comments as a group to the Institute of Internal Auditors as they relate to public transit. So we look forward to that opportunity, and we expect it to happen before the end of this month. In terms of a timeline, the standards should be completed and then put out for all of us by the end of the year, and then subject to us implementing those in 2024. And at that point, I feel we'll need to come back to the audit committee and our board and our executive management team and discuss potential changes to our internal audit charter, as these standards may impact the charter, will likely impact what we need to include in the charter. So we'll address it at that time. And as you recall, we had some other issues that were identified in our external review. We have, we'll also include those thoughts at that time as we update our charter. Any questions on the Institute of Internal Audit changes and standards? With that, we'll move on to our first quarter report. This is our standard slide where we're going to pretty much mirror the quarterly report, which we'll share with the board and the audit committee in June. And this is the presentation of that for this committee. I believe our first presentation is going to be by Laura Crawshaw, our staff auditor.
Morning, Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager, CEO Birdsong Terry, and members of Executive Management. Before I begin with completed projects for the first quarter, we have a slide here showing an example template that we use for completed projects and projects in progress. Includes the objective, scope, results, and whether there are issues for board consideration. Results in order from most favorable to least favorable are satisfactory, marginally satisfactory, marginally unsatisfactory, and unsatisfactory. So I will now present projects that were completed in the first quarter. First is an audit of RTA's drug and alcohol program. This audit was a collaboration with our safety department as part of their 3-year review of our public transportation agency safety plan. The objective was to evaluate program adherence to federal regulations and FTA guidance. The scope was PTSP compliance with ODOT and FTA checklists for content as it relates to our drug and alcohol program. Our results were satisfactory and there are no issues for board consideration. Next completed project is travel and expense reimbursement. We review all trip reports and travel expense reimbursements for compliance with policy and procedures. Our results were satisfactory with findings and recommendations for management, and there are no issues for board consideration. The next completed project is the vehicle purchase of 20 compressed natural gas coaches. The board authorized the exercise of an option under contract 2021-071 with Gillig for the purchase and delivery of up to 20 40-foot low-floor CNG coaches. The scope was the applicable Buy America review required by the FTA. Our results were satisfactory and there were no issues for board consideration. I will now transition to our projects in progress. First project in progress from the first quarter is an audit of configuration management. This is also in collaboration with the safety department for the 3-year PTAS review cycle. The objective is to evaluate GCRTA compliance with FTA and SSO requirements for configuration management and to provide assurance on the configuration management plan, governance, and execution. This project is in the planning and risk assessment phase, and the scope will be determined at the conclusion of that phase. The next project in progress is the physical inventory. The objective is to provide assurance for management's physical inventory of parts accounting until 12/31/22. For the scope, management is counting 80% of inventory by value, and we will observe management counts, reconcile records, evaluate controls, and conduct sample counts. We have an update on this project, which is that supply chain had to pause inventory due to staffing limitations, and counts will resume in the third quarter. Last project in progress I will present on is Fair Media ticket stock. Our objective is to review the ticket stock vendor contract, identify compliance obligations and risks to management objectives, and document controls and evaluate compliance with the contract. The scope is pre-printed ticket stock inventory, blank ticket stock inventory, fare card testing, fair media destruction, and contract invoicing. This project is in the reporting phase, and a report will be issued soon. I will now hand it over to my fellow staff auditor, Darren Garlock, to present his projects in progress.
Thank you, Laura. Audit Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, and General Manager CEO Birdsong Terry, and welcome guests. Good morning. At the request of GM CEO Birdsong Terry, Internal Audit has begun evaluating the survey inputs for traction performance measurement. Our objective is to validate that survey design and methodology are reliable and that results are accurately captured and reported. Our scope includes the customer experience, the community value, and the workplace experience surveys from 2022, and we are currently in the planning phase. We are also currently in the testing phase of an employee and dependent healthcare eligibility audit. Our objective is to evaluate compliance with our healthcare coverage policies and procedures. The scope includes enrollment records and supporting information from January of 2021 through March of 2023. The Common Area Maintenance Agreement is the agreement between GCRTA and Bedrock Real Estate, which allows our customers to use the common areas of Tower City to access the gateway access and the rapid station. The objective was to identify the requirements of the agreement and to validate compliance with those terms. The scope included a payment history review, invoice accuracy, utility billing, and reimbursable expenses. We recently met with the new GCRTA property manager and are planning to schedule a meeting with Bedrock soon. And then we're finishing up an audit of the Public Transportation Agency safety plans, accident notification, and investigation procedures. Our objective was to ensure compliance with FTA, NTSB, and SSO requirements for accident notification. The scope included compliance with FTA standards and GCRTA SOPs, accident reporting, response, and investigations. We've met with management to share our findings, and we'll be submitting a final report soon. And now I'd like to reintroduce Molly O'Donnell, who is going to discuss her projects in progress.
Can I ask a question first?
Sure.
So, I understand a lot of like how we audit, when we're auditing the insurance, and those are like very physical documents or inventory, it's hard. But when you're going back and you're trying to do on the traction performance measures, and there's surveys that are being taken, but obviously we don't have access to the people who took the surveys, or because we don't track that. So I guess I'm trying to get an understanding, how do you audit that process?
Sure. First, we would look at the surveys themselves. I know in 2022, for quarters 1 and 2, TransPro did the surveys, and then for quarters 3 and 4, it was transitioned to a third party. And now in 2023, it's a different person doing the survey work, for at least for the customer experience. So first is just making sure that the surveys themselves remain the same and consistent throughout, and looking to see like how did TransPro administer the surveys, and then looking at the second, who did Q3 and Q4, like how did they then also administer the surveys, making sure there's consistency with how the surveys were administered to the public, how we're collecting that information, and how we're interpreting it.
How can you go back, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but how can you ever go back to see how it was taken? Like, the surveys.
The raw data that's collected, it's this huge spreadsheet, and in it, for the customer experience survey in Q1 and Q2, they could only do it via tablet. The person would get on the bus, the person giving the survey, they'd read the questions to whoever they're administering the survey to, and then they would indicate the results. Q3 and Q4 were the same, only tablet. In 2023, they can do a tablet, they could do a paper version, they could scan a QR code and take it. So in 2022, they all took it the same way via tablet. But going forward, I haven't looked at any of the results for 2023, but I would imagine that raw data would indicate how they took the survey.
So with a QR code, that customer, that rider would be inputting that directly into the app with no assistance from
Right,
another
they'd be doing
party?
it themselves.
Okay.
In the last quarter, we began an audit of engineering project controls and project support. Our objective for this project is to identify the management controls in place that support project management in the engineering division. And our ultimate goal with this project is to update our construction project audit template, which is a set of testing procedures that can be used on each construction project audit for evaluating project controls. Our scope is the engineering project management control environment, and this project is currently in the planning and risk assessment phase. I have 2 projects that we're wrapping up that are in the reporting phase. This first project, employee hiring practices, our objective, it was consulting engagement with human resources to document and understand the current hiring process and evaluate any bottlenecks. Our scope was reviewing the efficacy and efficiency of the hiring process. And as I said, this project is in the reporting phase. My last project, also in the reporting phase, is our overtime project. Our objective for this audit was to prepare a data analysis of overtime expenses across the authority and explore this analysis to identify patterns and red flags for follow-up. The scope was overtime expenses from 2019 to 2022, Ultramain, which is the maintenance management system, work order records, and operator time and attendance system records. Additionally, we completed 6 management interviews to support looking into the patterns that we identified in the data analysis. And then this project is in the reporting phase too. I'll turn it over to Steven Zimmerman to discuss the motor overhaul project.
GCRT Internal Audit continues to monitor the motor overhaul that's occurring at Swiger Motors. The present update is that more than half of the heavy rail fleet has been outfitted with newly overhauled motors, and project management had to be transitioned to a new individual due to some internal promotions in the organization. we'll continue to monitor this project until the motor overhauls are complete. And then keeping on the topic of rail cars, just for consistency, maintaining our railcar vehicle replacement slide. Obviously, we talked about the pre-award. We're expecting that by the time we come to you at the next quarterly presentation, we'll have transitioned this from pre-award to manufacturing. I will now turn it over to Andrew Scott, who is going to talk about some of our IT projects.
Good morning, Chair Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, CEO GM Birdsong Terry, other members of the executive team. We are currently engaging in an audit of our accrued time. The objective is to document the processes involved in accruing time, such as sick, personal holidays, and vacation time. The scope of the audit is to look at the different accruals and hours earned across the different systems tracked in the operator timekeeping system, Kronos timekeeping system, and our system of record, Oracle. To date, we've had a number of meetings with various departments, including HRIS, benefits, payroll, and members of the IT staff to engage in the data gathering processes and collecting a number of different Oracle procedures and scripts used for modifying the data. In addition to the projects included on our audit plan, I make it a point to keep very up to date with the miscellaneous IT teams across the authority. I have standing meetings with both the directors of IT and director of management information services. So we can, as the audit department, keep up with how the restructuring of the audit of the technology teams has affected the organization, allow us to keep up with major system upgrades such as Oracle to be completed at the beginning of Q3, Ultramain completing later this month, and the Hastis system, which actually went live just a couple weeks ago. In addition to those major systems, we've also partaken in the testing of the implementation of the EasyFare system and continue working with Mike Lively and his team, as well as fleet management on the implementation of EasyFare and tracking of the hardware installed and the data collected through those systems. Some other upcoming IT projects being handled by these teams include an HR applicant tracking system used to interface with our current Oracle hiring management system, a learning management system to help assist tracking of all the different courses and different types of trainings that internal employees have taken part in. Data center co-location, there's an active project to work with the Blue Bridge Center down on Euclid Avenue to co-locate our hardware so we can use that as a source of disaster recovery and backups. Continue working on the point of sale implementation that came from a recommendation from a fraud investigation back in 2016. And then a variety of infrastructure updates, including the move of many systems to a cloud infrastructure, as well as the staffing of their departments. Mike Lively and Josh Miranda are forming an IT council. This is meant to fill the role previously held by the now defunct IT steering committee. Initially, the initial meeting was to be held last Friday, but there were much bigger meetings to be held that day. So the initial meeting for this group will be held on May 23rd. Topics to be covered by this group will include IT governance, security initiatives, and then major projects and initiatives for the organization when it comes to the technology scope. Members of this council will include the DGM of Finance, Raj Gautam, DGM Operations, Dr. Flounce Kaver, Director of Information Technology, Michael Lively, Director of Management Information Services, Joshua Miranda, the IT and MIS management team, as well as Tony, myself, and any other stakeholders as required moving forward. If there are no questions, I'll turn it over to Randy to discuss the Q1 continuous audits.
Good morning, Mayor Kumar, members of the Audit Committee, General Manager and CEO Birdsong Terry, and guests. Continuous auditing. Our purchasing card, the objective of that is the GCRTA P-Card program provides a means for streamlining payments, allowing card holders to procure certain goods and services in a timely manner. The scope, the internal audit developed a script to evaluate the P-Card transactions for compliance with the GCRTA procurement card policy. The script has been run February through April, and the billing cycles have been reviewed by audit leadership, and the results are being prepared for the management review in action. Revenue collection, the purpose of the objective is to evaluate and provide assurance that the customer fares are collected from fee collection systems and reconciled, posted to the accounting record and deposited to the bank. The scope is to develop a script to analyze this fare collection system and compare it to cash and transit and accounting and bank records. And again, the script was executed and it's been, results are being finalized for management. On this continuous auditing script, I kind of want to take a step away from this slide, and because our team had went to a agile auditing webinar, and I'm very familiar with agile auditing from an IT background, and that kind of caught my attention a bit because I'm like, how can you do agile audit? How can you do agile for auditing as opposed to IT? So basically, what they do is they break it down into small chunks called sprints. And it takes about 2 or 3 weeks to do a typical sprint. Not that we've implemented that, but it just kind of caught my attention. And the way it works, it's done in a very collaborative format where you're continuously in contact with the stakeholders, which is a little bit different from how auditing works. And the results are shared immediately with the stakeholders. And that's had the tendency to be very efficient. And that kind of just caught my attention because I thought that tied in very well with continuous auditing. Especially with revenue, because in the past, with revenue, I'd collect the data, and it was very manual process, balancing everything across the GFI, across Oracle, and across the banks. It took a considerable amount of time, but over the months that I've been here, we've got that process, that script down to like a science where it balances maybe 95% of the records almost immediately, and it's just the last 5% you have to balance. So me and Andrew were kind of thinking, why wait so long to share those results? I literally click a button, it balances most of it. So we're going to start running this process on a monthly basis. We might still do the results or the actual audit quarterly, but we're going to run the results monthly and then share the results with the stakeholders immediately as we find it. Because usually if I find a discrepancy and I'll email someone from revenue, they've already found it and had it identified, but what if they don't? And it's 3 months later or something, and then someone disappeared with a bag of cash or something that we discover like 3 months later. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking with a lot of the continuous audits, is as we fine tune the scripts and get them to run more efficiently, we're going to start running them a lot more frequently. Any questions on agile auditing? And I don't fully understand agile auditing just yet, but we're still working on it.
Through the chair. No immediate concerns. I think that's a good idea to keep tabs on it more frequently so that we're not waiting 3 months in arrears. I think that makes a lot of sense. Is there a reporting manager that you're providing that information to on the management side, or is it just to the entire department?
Yes, as we, just in continuous auditing, I'm not saying that auditors in general wait that long. I'm just trying to address that kind of a framework of agile auditing where you're just constantly involved. So we're constantly involved with the managers, and it's going to be even more so now. You know, as I run them, I'm sharing the results as I run them. That's like the whole premise behind it.
Quick question, and this I'm not sure would either be maybe for Tony as well. Is this the only specific audit that's going to have agile auditing applied, or is this a practice that IA is going to begin to adopt?
Like even with PNC, even before I even heard of agile auditing, we started doing that monthly. And eventually, I think all of them are going to start, because that's why it's called continuous auditing. We are going to start doing it more frequently as we kind of get the scripts more efficient to make it easier and take all the manual processing out of it. We will start doing it more frequently for all the continuous audits.
To the chair, this is Flance Caver. When you're talking about agile auditing, are you talking about it in the same way that we talk about agile project management, where we are attempting to have just continuous input as opposed to waiting to the end as a style of auditing or as a method of auditing, not a technical aspect?
Yes, I think it's the same principle.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Payroll. The objective is to evaluate payroll data from the authority's ERP system, and the scope of internal audit utilizes our scripts and payroll data from our ERP system, and then meetings have been held with management for review of flag results of the parameters. And this has been run for February through April, and the results have been shared with management. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button here. Am I doing something wrong here? Can you see?
Okay, our slide is not forwarding, but I'll advance with my paper here. Thanks, Teresa. The next window is the special requests and emerging issues that we looked at during the quarter, and there were no special requests or issues for the quarter. In terms of, thank you, Teresa. Thank you. In terms of external audit coordination, we're always looking to identify where we can minimize duplication of efforts and maximize our risk coverage. We are working closely with our financial auditors, the State Auditor of Ohio. They are in the fieldwork phase of the 2022 financial statement audit and CAFR. And I believe that they're on schedule to present in June. Thank you, Raj. They are relying on a number of our projects as their standards permit and as our standards permit. Also, this is a pretty busy week for a lot of our staff. The Federal Transit Administration is conducting their triennial review. This has been going on since sometime in November and December, where information was forwarded to them in advance. And they are completing that review, and we expect their results in the next couple of weeks. And then finally, we're always working with our State of Ohio Department of Transportation Rail Safety Oversight consultant. That's Vital Assurance. And they come to the authority on a quarterly basis, and we share our work with them. Status of outstanding audit follow-up. Anytime that we issue a recommendation to management, we use our audit management system and communicate with the stakeholders, try to get their status updates, excuse me, and as they implement corrective actions, we'll go back in and validate those and close them out. Other projects, we, as I reported the last time I was here, we are engaging a third party to help us with the healthcare benefit expense audit. This is a specialized consultant that will help us take a look at how our third-party administrators are processing our claims. Specific specialties include interpreting and helping to audit diagnostic codes, procedure codes, and so forth. So as that unfolds, we'll share that information with the committee. Other projects, we are managing our fraud hotline. We're in a number of steering committees to share our broad knowledge with management and support their objectives. Certainly the Change Order Review Committee, the Rail Car Replacement Steering Committee, and a number of system upgrades. Staff had the following training during the first quarter completed. We have a pretty robust training program and some requirements we have to meet, and we're on track to do so. That concludes our presentation for today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Any additional questions from committee members?
I see you have a lot of people over there, and we're always glad to see you and your presentations. So that reminds me of just staff. Are we fully staffed in the audit, or are we still missing one person?
We have one vacancy, is our audit manager. Steven Zimmerman is filling in as our acting audit manager, and we will be posting that position soon.
Any questions from other board members, management? Tony, thank you,
Yeah, just one quick follow-up, Tony. The new audit management system, that's fully operational?
Mayor Weiss, we brought that new system, thanks for the budget and the opportunity to replace our old system. It was about 12 years old. We have a new modern state-of-the-art system. We brought it in-house and for go live in December, and we are on the tail end of the projects that we had in our old system, and then, but we are fully utilizing our new system. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
anyone else? Well, Tony, thank you for your complete presentation and for the team's participation in it. I think it's great that we've got this on a quarterly cycle, and as you and I have discussed offline, the 2 items from the external review plus watching how these standards play out and how they may or may not affect those 2 items will be something we'll pick up later in the year. Obviously, we'll get input from management on those 2 external assessment items, but those were items that were in your charter that were driven by the board. So as we go through this, we want to make sure that we don't forget about those 2 items, but to your point, when we had our discussion, you know, they may be affected by how these standards are finalized. So just to hold tight on those and do those all at once and make sure they all fit together is the direction we want to proceed, if that's okay with the committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There no other business? The meeting, a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.